Thank you for that.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Mike Bryan, and I'm the Youth Engagement Manager for CyberUp. Today, joining me for a day in the life of a Security Operations Center is Dan Hulbert, who is the Director of the SOC here at Mastercard in St. Louis. And if everybody could mute yourselves, please, that would be a big help so we don't have any echoes. And if questions come up during the presentation, we've still got people that are unmuted. If questions come up during the presentation, please put those in the chat, and then I will go over those at the end of the presentation with Dan, and we'll have a little discussion and all. I leave it up to you, Dan. Take it away.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Yeah, pleasure to be here, guys. So let me try to figure out these controls and we'll hop in. So currently I am the manager of our Security Operations Center, also known as the SOC. So I'm gonna walk you through kind of a high level, maybe more organizational, if you will, of how we operate here at Mastercard, where our presence sits, some of the things that we do on a day-to-day basis. And then I'll try to jump into some more fun stuff, right? Like maybe a little bit of an overview of some incidents that we commonly deal with, how we deal with those incidents, and then how we escalate those into, crisis, or, some of our service-oriented teams like our CSI, which is Corporate Security Investigations. They do a lot of our forensic analysis. We have a lot of different groups that we partner with through the Fusion Center. Pretty common, I think of it as a war room. So we'll kind of jump into that ecosystem as well, right? So, but to get started, I'll do kind of a mild introduction of me. My history, guys, is kind of dense in physical security. I've got a pretty long-winded background that runs the gamut of technical surveillance countermeasures. I did a lot of event security for a period of time, which means I would escort maybe very large groups of people to a sporting event, for instance, run all the logistics, partner with like meeting services teams just to make sure that things went, pretty cleanly. I also helped stand up our physical security operations center some years ago. That kind of globalized things. We did a lot of travel tracking and monitoring. We did all the typical stuff that you'd find in a physical GSOC, which is monitoring access control systems, CCTV, those sorts of things, travel monitoring. And the reason I mention this history is I made this transition, over to the cyber side. It was very refreshing. I'm kind of a technical person by nature. Just the way my mind operates and some of the things that I tried to do. But the way we run operations here at Mastercard are a hybridized security operations center. And what I mean is we do physical and cyber ops out of the same shop, right? So I have both physical and cyber security personnel that report into me. Those teams can consist of incident response, what we call tier 1 monitoring. I try not to look at things in our SOC from a hierarchical level, but more of a role-based level. Our SOC tier 1 is very diversified, let's say, right? We have a lot of tools, right? We have a lot of network segments that we monitor, and a lot of different teams that we partner with. So the sheer diversity of that team is significant. And the way we carve things up in this hybridized state, it really kind of gives us a really operationalized and cyber-centric physical security operation. So we look at things through traditional frameworks like NIST, things along those lines from a data classification effort. And we've simply applied that same logic to the physical side. So just an important note, I touched on that quite a bit. I'm going to stay more cyber-centric now, but just so you guys kind of understand my history, I think it's important for you to also understand how I kind of jumped into this role and how simple the transition was, for me as I, really shifted from a physical security centric and minded individual, over to cyber.
Hey, Dan,
Sure.
We're looking at your presenter mode. You may have to go up to display settings and reverse those.
if you can help me.
Swap presenter and slideshow right there. That
Okay,
should do it. There we go.
Yeah.
there
Nice.
we are. AV
Thank you, Mike.
specialist. I really appreciate it, Mike. We juggled with that for a few minutes. We needed you. So, quick overview. What is the SOC to us, right? We have a very, very dense set of what I would refer to as our security stack, right? We monitor, mail, network segmentations, content delivery networks, just the sheer logging volume of things that we intend to measure are kind of piped all into our security operations center. Now, when I mentioned that very diversified tier one, I'm so impressed with this team just because of the volume of tools that they have to manage, the sheer volume of those kind of unrefined alerts that come through, and trying to make sense of that from an analytical level, right? So we do a lot of this through automation, security orchestration, right? To try to, take the cream, set that aside for like a human being to work their way through SOC ops. And then those things get escalated as we identify that kind of cream, if you will, into a high priority incident ticket. So when our systems are telling us that we think we have a problem, we still don't trust it. This type of work is kind of laden with false positives. You're constantly trying to get to a very high degree of a true positive rate to make sure that, the fidelity of what you're doing and dealing with is correct. And by the time that actually hits a human, in terms of a ticket or an alert or a notable, or even just like an email system that gets some human eyes on it, that is usually,
Hey, Dan, you still there?
is that better, Mike?
Yeah, you're back. We lost you for a couple minutes.
Oh, did you really? Okay. At what point?
You were talking about, oh gosh, I don't even know.
Okay, no worries.
It was this slide for sure.
So I'm gonna breeze through this, not knowing how dense it was, but essentially it's systematic methodology, guys, that we're looking to operate in within our SOC, right? So we're very, very diverse in the tools that we use. Automation heavy, right? Security orchestration heavy. We try to make sure that by the time our human capital is being applied to a problem and we're providing analysis, that it is real, right? Because we have to deal with quite a bit, was one thing I wanted to run through. And then also just kind of the sheer volume of teams that we have to partner with is extremely important as well as an organization. So the way that we're broken out, we have an operation in the St. Louis area. I'm assuming most of you are here, knowing Mike and the program. And St. Louis is really kind of a dense footprint for us in terms of Mastercard's operations and technology headquarters, right? Network operations team, all of our engineering elements and things like that kind of were born out of St. Louis and are starting to spread the globe. We are also doing that mission, right? So we call that Follow the Sun. We have a replica security operations center in Pune, India. We also have another replica, relatively fresh, in Sydney, Australia, right? So just the way that we're cut up with both physical and cyber ops, we're very hybrid, if you will, and then that's that physical and cyber blend of everything that we do, and we're also follow the sun, which gives us a really effective way of maximizing the use of that human capital by making sure people are well rested. We've got good hours. We also have our people very close to the incident at hand, right? So when we have production network incidents, or maybe it's a customer, consumer that may be experiencing some sort of an outage, not suggesting that this is an incident that we've worked through, but perhaps a DDoS, something like that. When we can put our personnel close to that business model, it works very effectively just because of the sheer scale of MasterCard and how our teams are represented around the world, including the businesses and customers. So we're really out there on the edge, making sure that we can partner with different law enforcement agencies, different business units, and really kind of understand what that consumer, that customer, that regulator, all of those different elements that are kind of geographically centric is critically important to the way we operate as well, guys. Okay. So with that being said, how do we do all of this, right? So SIEM, security, incident, and event management is a pretty critical element in terms of how we run our operations. And what that is as you are dealing with different applications, whether that's a workstation, if you're familiar with the term EDR, endpoint detection and remediation, we've got all of these different appliances that are doing security things for us, and then business analysis that's taking place on these systems, including things like transactions. We take all of that very dense data set, pipe that into our SIEM tool, right? So that a lot of our refined alerts can be generated through that automated logic that I had mentioned before. Extremely important that that SIEM, it's so critical to the way that we operate. And Daniel Stonebarger, I see, has joined us. He's one of our tier 1 analysts out of the SOC here in the St. Louis area. So Daniel, I'll introduce you as well, just to maybe touch on some of the tools that you guys are using commonly, and get kind of zeroed in on how you guys operate that SIEM. And I'll jump into the next portion, but I'm glad to see you here. I think it'd be good to just kind of get you introduced to some of the folks on the call and maybe give them some oversight. I invited Daniel, kind of the last second guy. This is a day in the life of a SOC analyst. Critically important that somebody, from our SOC, I think, is represented. If you want to maybe talk through some of the things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis, Daniel, I think it'd be helpful.
Yeah. So we touch a lot of aspects in the SOC. One of the bigger ones is Splunk. That's where most of our alerts are coming through right now. So understanding what those alert types are, where it is impacted on the network, and how to understand what's happening quickly with the data that's provided there. We also get various requests coming into the SOC inbox from users. Hey, is this malicious? Or we're hearing about this new 0-day. Are you guys aware of it? So it's just using open source tools quite a bit to try to hunt things down sometimes. Another tool that we use that's pretty new is Azure Sentinel. So it's cloud-based. Understanding how to jump into those alerts and what do these things really mean is pretty big and critical. And then another one we've had in store for a while is ATP Defender. I've started to rely on that a little more for investigations because it just touches everything. You can, instead of looking through an actual log, you're looking at a highlight of a log where it says at this time this connection was made at this, from this user on this device. So that's been very helpful. And then, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I cut you off, Daniel.
I was just going to say one of the other big things that is communicating with senior management and being able to explain kind of what's going on the fly. We do have a lot of C-level stuff that comes into the SOC. So understanding the communication level that happens there is huge as well.
Cool, thanks, Daniel. So with that being said, guys, we kind of, gave you a little bit of the lay of the land of how we operate like this. There's many ways to run a SOC. This is the way we run ours. You find a lot of semblances across, different industries, but, in being a technology company in the financial sector, we have found a lot of success in the way we've built ours. But just wanted to see if there's any initial questions before maybe I jump into, some of the more fun stuff, or maybe some things that we're dealing with, with this being, recorded. I can't get into the finer details of some of our recent incidents, but covering some things like solar winds, maybe some phishing attacks, some of the things we're seeing from like BEC, from business email compromise, how important supply chains are. I was going to run through some recent issues, but just wanted to see if we had any questions or comments up until this point.
May I speak?
Nothing in the chat yet.
All right. So, one thing, guys, if you could look at it through the perspective of Daniel Stonebarger, who you just heard from, we're dealing with these like constant barrage of issues, and it's relatively alarming when you really look at it, right? We've got tools that are telling us things are going on. We've got people telling us we have things going on. We have all sorts of phishing analysis, artificial intelligence. There's a lot of things that are helping feed all of these different systems and kind of the engine, if you will. The really important thing is making sure that by the time your human capital is looking at these incidents, we're fresh. We understand what's going on and how important it is to understand that each and every one of those instances could be the end of your enterprise. And you have to look at it that way, right? You need to be calm. We're incident responders. We don't like to throw things out there that just generate fear and panic, and it's not a scare tactic. But every single time that we have a notable event cross our hands, and we're managing that from the other side of a monitor and a keyboard. One thing that we all need to understand in our world and the culture that we have built is just how important that element is. Each and every time we touch something, it could be the end, right? Or some major network intrusion that we just simply don't want to have happen. And we have to look at it that way. Now, tools, right? You've got all sorts of things that are looking at how do we protect our enterprise from all these different threat vectors and variants. Now, we can make significant amounts of investment to try to make those things better. The problem is it's a cat and mouse game, and you have to 100%, and the industry has demonstrated this over several years now. I think since 2012, I saw some recent figures that security awareness campaigns are really nailing what I would refer to as just the assurances that are needed, that we don't put all of the responsibility on our tools. We don't put all of that responsibility on our SOC and different engineering teams that are trying to fend against these bad things. Trying to spread that awareness and education of how our user population is really, really important. And to kind of walk you guys through a recent phishing campaign that had come in, if you can imagine, we have a bit of compromise, right, which is suggestive that a supply chain has now been, completely compromised. We now know that, we're starting to see some fish come through our systems. Our tools perhaps do not see this issue, but if we had an employee that had identified that this was a thing by just simply reporting and coming into the SOC, tipping us off that there was a massive issue, now we're talking about tools and systems that aren't quite refined enough to pick up on this. It's not a signature-based system, and it's so critical that those teams pick up on those issues, report that into that SOC, and get us moving in the right direction to defend against what could be a significant compromise, like the way an employee thinks about this issue is massively important, just because of that second. If you can imagine that second slide with the soldier and the flag there, it's that culture that we build inside the room, that this could be the bad thing that the Mastercard team has to deal with, and we constantly have this barrage of attackers that are seeing us as an opportunity. And I'm not just talking about Mastercard, but just the industry at large. And if they can get a foothold into that network, how critically important it is to try to weed that out and make sure that there's no persistence present. Otherwise, you're talking about things like critical infrastructure compromise, different things that could happen, transactions, economic catastrophe, and it's really important that those things are all working in unison to make sure that we're really attack ready and incident friendly, right, and dealing with those things at a fast pace. So just to kind of run through, a little bit of what we look at, and that's the kill chain. Another is like the MITRE attack framework. Is anyone on the call, familiar with any of this, and any questions on, kind of how those phases are introduced, and the way that we, like, not only our systems but our people, look at incident management, and wondering if there was any questions up until this point.
So the questions that we have so far are, what is the relationship like between the SOC and the IT department?
Yeah, very, very important. So we partner significantly with our network command center as well, that is doing all of the performance-based ratings of what's happening with our broad scope of networks. So critically important that we work in unison. IT service management is a big element in that as well, because anything that could potentially be some sort of a service outage, in our network, could also be a result of a security incident, right? So us working in unison with this, very high volume of incidents that could be taking place, us not knowing what those things are, very important that we're working in unison. And then when you kind of drill down to that IT related layer, those teams are really our best friends as well. When you're talking about like service management on a workstation, the teams that are helping us deploy some of those security agents that work, on those different elements, another thing that's important. So I can't underestimate how important it is for your SOC to be highly collaborative, right? Partnering with some of these different teams, making sure that we tie into them and they tie into us for reporting security incidents, because it's really that technology that we're relying on. That's that engineering apparatus, if you will, that really kind of provides that really hard outer layer. And we have to work in unison with them, and that's extremely important. It's a good question, and can't underestimate that at all.
And then another question: has the SOC ever requested an application be built by the IT department?
So whoever that is, what define application? Are we talking about a production, customer facing application that provides a service, or? So let me take a crack at it and see if it.
A security application.
Yeah, I'm not sure I entirely understand the question. So let me see if this is correct. But if we're looking for some sort of like a security technology to augment our security stack and how we operate, the answer is yes, right? So we're constantly looking for different ways. The one thing that kind of jumps out at me is data science, artificial intelligence. If we have a team that has a pretty dense, methodology of tackling problems in a very different way, data is one thing that comes to mind. We constantly are presenting some of our peer teams. We look at our enterprise like a community, and if we have access to them, and you know, they have offers and are really trying to just help the community, if you will. It's a village that we try to apply. The answer is yes. We're constantly, you know, tapping other teams on the shoulder to support us with different tool sets. You know, sometimes those come via mergers and acquisitions as well, where, you know, if we start to deal with a new company that has, you know, significant amounts of technology and experience in that world, that's also important. So, you know, across the board, yes, yes, yes. You know, not only do we as a security company, a technology company, we do work inside that security apparatus by building and selling different sorts of frameworks like CyberQuant, Risk Recon, you know, elements of that nature, and then also utilizing internal teams to help us, you know, augment what we see as possible opportunities or gaps in our security environment. So it's a good question. The answer is yes.
Did you say how many tier 1 members are monitoring in the SOC at one time?
Yep. So we try to, and keeping in mind, I'm going to stay focused on exclusively our cybersecurity operations center when I answer the question. But you know, we try to have a minimum set of eyes on glass from both the tier 1 and the tier 2 level. Now, that's not to say that we're fully represented in terms of how we have that distributed, scaled security operations center, if you will. We have different teams, but you know, just exclusive eyes on glass. You know, trying to do some monitoring, and I'm also dodging the question in some ways, not giving away all the pudding here on how we operate, but you know, I'll say we usually have 3 to 4 people, you know, actively looking at things at different layers of the organization at all times from a SOC centric perspective. Okay. So, you know, what else are we doing inside of our SOC? You know, when it comes to, you know, really understanding what you have, we're constantly training, right? Somebody asked the question, security application. We have what we call business operations teams that span the globe, right? Development operations that happen with coding and different things along those lines. So we're constantly developing these different apps, these different tools, these different technologies. We as a SOC need to understand what those are, right? We need to know where they are. We need to know how to defend them, the threat models that might be applied against it. And I think this kind of marries back to that original question of, are we partnering with these other teams? And the answer is yes. You know, we're constantly studying that inventory. We're partnering with those business teams as well to make sure that we fully understand what that application's doing, right? What the gem is that's behind it. You know, sometimes that's data, sometimes that's intellectual property, sometimes that's just the sheer keeping that business application alive for the consumer. And we as a security operations team need to understand that. It's a big part of our role, knowing what we have, keeping those things up to date, refreshing, and think of things in terms of a life cycle, so that we're constantly partnering with those different business apparatus to make sure that, you know, we're still doing the right things at all times with that business app. So very life cycle centric, I would say, when it comes to that. So that's a big part of the world. So any additional questions when it comes to SOC ops? So Mike, I'll ask you.
Yes.
Got a little bit of an echo, but is there anything, you know, I know there's a lot of partnerships that you guys are undertaking, and you know, with us doing some work with you guys, is there any sort of opportunity that you can see us, you know, people like Daniel Stonebarger from, you know, tier 1 operations, us from, you know, just the SOC leadership level? I know we're doing our part to try to try to offer what we can to you guys. Do you see any opportunities that maybe, folks on the call may want to understand about us, or maybe how, we can partner better?
Yeah, I mean, Tony and I are always talking about ways to try to partner with MasterCard. We haven't had a lot of luck with placing any apprentices there. So that would be kind of our first step in forming a partnership with you guys. That would be like a formal partnership outside of these little volunteer gigs.
Okay.
So I don't know if that has anything to do with you or if that's another department.
It would be another. I have some. Yeah, I have some team members that we could potentially, talk to see what that hang up might look like. But yeah, that's going to be another. But I'm also thinking things like, so Daniel, you recently went through some blue team exercises and lab oriented materials. Could you maybe share your experience on that junior blue team in particular, and then some of the other blue team labs that you've been running through from a training perspective? Because I know you've really enjoyed what you've done. We're trying to push that into our security operations center to kind of amplify training, but for folks on the call, might be good to understand what you experienced there.
Yeah, so there's a company called the Security Blue Team. They exclusively provide training for SOC style operations. They cover things like network analysis, phishing attacks, practical exercises at the end of each section, so that you can complete that exercise and prove that you've picked up the material and you can run with it. It was extremely valuable for me as a new person. I've only been in the SOC world for about a year and a half now, so there were a lot of missing things that I didn't know that I didn't know. So that training and those labs were able to bring that out. And think about things like, what does network traffic look like in a PCAP? How do you identify who that email sender really is? It might say Gmail or it might say MasterCard, but can you identify where the reply to is actually going? I touched on a little bit on deep web operations and how to avoid trouble and see if any data might be siphoning over there. And then the next level that I went to was pretty intensive as far as skill level, going from the junior level to level 1. It was a lot more in depth. It covered incident response, phishing. One of the bigger things that I enjoyed out of it was actually the mental health section and emotional intelligence. So like when to say I'm getting burned out, or I'm not understanding this, and to communicate with your management line effectively. It was just invaluable. And to the point when I took the exam about 3 weeks ago, I didn't make it, but I was actively learning things as the exam. So it was really valuable and crucial. I think I've taken things from that training and started to utilize those tools and tactics in my own investigations in the SOC.
So guys, what kind of industry certifications do your team members have?
Yeah, so that's we have several, right? We're a pretty diverse bunch in terms of the types of folks that we target, but some of the typical certs that you're going to find throughout the org are CISSP, right? And that's a big one through ISC squared. The others would be some of the stuff we're looking at, like that Daniel just mentioned through the blue team. And the way that we look at this as well is it's kind of an extension of SANS, if you guys are familiar. But incident handler is another one. CEH is another common certified ethical hacker. That would I'd say be the big parties. Definitely the SANS category. Definitely any of those channels in ISC squared are what we tend to kind of drive towards inside the SOC, because the incident handling portions are pretty critical. Understanding through ISC, like how to present and demonstrate risk The CISSP really helps with that. It's kind of a holistic, CSO or consultant that looks through the prism of security. It really helps you to kind of speak the language of the business and with the industry. It's a little more challenging. Definitely take some time to get through that one. Few months of study is pretty common. It's very dense, but I'd say that those are the two major veins are ISC squared and a lot of different security oriented SANS material. So Daniel, anything else that kind of jumps out at you that the team tends to have?
We have a couple of folks that have the CompTIA C1 certs. The manager that hired me, he was the manager of the SOC at the time. He went A+ all the way through at least Sec+, and to me that was impressive. Like, the manager has these certs, but from us, that's all I've really seen. We covered security blue team, ISC squared, and
yeah, that's a good point. I did forget about the CYSA, but it's one of the recommended, baseline certs that our SOC team members carry. So it kind of brings it out of that Sec+ world and more into the cybersecurity realm. And that's been a pretty effective one for our SOC Tier 1 operations, I would say, is that CYSA.
Great. And if a student wants to work in a SOC someday, how would you suggest they prepare for that as far as education and certifications, etc.?
So I'll take an early crack at this, but Daniel's the poster child for making this thing happen, right? He's got some development experience and things like that, and made the jump over to the cybersecurity world as well. But definitely, be that gadget person, right? Work on your home network. Maybe define your own labs at home. There's a lot of things that you can do to get some cybersecurity expertise just by taking your own, home network, your devices, just the application of things as simple as antivirus and just understanding how those things really function and tick. Standing up and spinning up your own home network segments and kind of treat them as a lab, I think, is just a great starting point. Stay engaged on just different news and what's happening in the world. Just studying and infinitely knowing, like maybe the SolarWinds attack. If you're not familiar, it's a massive supply chain attack that's quite possibly nation state, and staying in touch with that, chasing that thing down to the realities of what's going on, I think, is also another very easy and good way of just staying in touch. And then, obviously moving towards some education, some certification, things like that. So Daniel, I think this is like a good one for you to talk through, like how you from the outside decided that you want to make that transition over to our security operations center, approximately a year and a half ago, and some of the things that you did to make that a reality.
Sure. So my journey started with I was in a work social area, and I was talking to a developer about how to write some code that could basically become malware on a USB to encrypt some files. And at the time, I wasn't aware who the crisis manager was, but he overheard the entire conversation. He said, "Hey, I've got this guy I think you should talk to," and he introduced me to Dan, who was the hiring manager at the time, Dan Unger. And so Dan and I talked, and then he really kind of put me through my paces. He would send me off to do things such as, building my home network, reviewing event logs from my own router, trying to identify what malicious traffic looked like, how did I mitigate it, and then we would meet, and he would kind of grade it and say, that's great, but what did you see here, or what did you notice, or what do you think you might have missed? And the biggest key for the whole thing was initiative. Like, it wouldn't have been okay for me to reach out to Dan and get his help and then just kind of let him drive, right? So having the initiative and really just kind of forcing it really to make sure that you're understanding the things that are happening. So initiative, and then from a non-technical standpoint, ask questions, ask lots of questions. Make sure you're organized, understand what some of the tools are, how we use them, and where's the documentation for those tools. So if you're in a SOC on a Saturday and you get a 0-day drop, you need to quickly identify, how do I handle this? What do I do? What's my next steps? And then, good.
No, I think you're spot on. I'm sorry to cut you off. I thought you were finished, but I think passion's a big one, right? And I think, you know, we found that in Daniel. We found that in, you know, a lot of our teams around the world, where we quite simply have built a culture of caring, right? We hire people that want to learn, that want to know this stuff, that ask those questions, right? And we have a very diverse bunch as a result, right? So different team members that are just looking and are passionate about making that jump across to cybersecurity is kind of where the rubber meets the road with me, right? The technical acumen will come. There's been a lot of questions about, you know, related to IT. Maybe it's a software developer that's looking to make that transition. Maybe it's somebody that was jumping into the IT support staff that wanted to make that jump, you know. But bottom line, either if it's organically grown to where you just want to jump into the cybersecurity field straight through, you know, college and training and work into a SOC, all the way through a business professional that's just looking for a change and wants to jump on board the cybersecurity industry. If you care, if you're willing to, you know, just kind of put yourself through the paces that Daniel mentioned, just to understand and to advance, that's a big one, right? And I think it equates back to that word, just passion, right? Do you love the stuff? You know, do you crave more, you know, more material? Do you want to, you know, constantly improve? And if the answer to that question, and cybersecurity is a variable, it's possible, you know, is the way I look at that.
Folks, what other questions do we have for Dan? Crickets.
Silence.
I guess you covered it all.
Yes, a lot going on there. I'm always happy, Mike, to, you know, take offline questions. I'm sure things pop up, you know, trying to cover, you know, from 30,000 foot down to the technical level is not the easiest thing to do in presentation form over the course of an hour. I kind of get that, and people have different thoughts. So if anything does, you know, come up that maybe I didn't cover well, you have a question about, or you want to take a deeper dive, I'm more than happy to, you know, spin up something. You know, maybe Mike, you know, you and I could touch base on how to get that line of questioning, or you know, anything that pops up over to me. But you know, as you can see, I've had my email address up here for some time. I'm more than happy. I'm also on LinkedIn too, guys. If anybody wants to connect, or, you know, shoot a message, happy to do that. We're a pretty collaborative bunch. This is about us beating the bad guys. So, you know, we're always talking with industry partners. You know, it's a village, right? You know, we're kind of a global crime fighter army, and yeah, we need to do that collectively. So, you know, please reach out if you got anything.
Hey, Dan, question just came to mind. You mentioned a number of certifications a little bit ago. Do you place any premium on graduate degrees in cybersecurity?
No, I don't. That's not to say that it's not important, right? There's when it comes to a graduate degree, the thing that I really look at is do you garner that experience to be able to really understand and digest the frameworks, how to measure risk, and then how to communicate upward. Those are really critical pieces in the cybersecurity world. You know, budgets are you know, sometimes hard to come by, and if you can't communicate to your board of directors, to your C-suite, and really have them understand some of the problems that you're dealing with, and do so in an industry guided way, you're going to have trouble. So I think that's where that graduate degree comes in. when it comes to just like getting into the SOC, sometimes it's no education at all. It's just that sheer passion that I had mentioned before, and just folks that have, maybe it's some computer science experience, things like that. You start to see a really wide array of team members that start to come in, and the certs are one angle, education's another, passions, a big part of that. But when it comes to a graduate or a master's or anything like that, I don't put a major premium on that, though, just to be honest.
So a college professor in cyber asks, anything you want to say to the educators in the field?
Yeah, so I myself, as much as saying that there's no premium, I am a graduate student seeking a cybersecurity management degree through WashU. So it is something that I do think is important at different stages of your career. It's something that I'm targeting. And if I had to talk to an educator, I have found a few things to be extremely helpful. And let's start with just two, right? Do you have the practical, experience or base understanding to do this role? And I've taken some very tough courses, and the reason those things were so tough, I mentioned before, I made that jump from the physical security world over to cyber. And when I really had to just to get cracking, and they said build a lab, download Kali or Ubuntu, and I want you to go crack this, capture the flag. That to me was kind of like earth shattering. I learned so much. I spent hours in my basement trying to figure things out and just Googling words that I didn't even initially understand. So that technical lab experience, I think, is really important. You may not have to be the person that's hands on keyboard to nail all that down, but you have to understand what your teams are dealing with, right? What you're agreeing to, the types of tools that you go and chase, understanding the bad guy and how they might be attacking you, I think is important. So speaking to an educator, I would say labs, hands-on technical experience is a big one that I would continue to recommend. And me as a graduate student, I learned a lot from that, and it helps me, I think, get the respect of team members as well when you have that base understanding, right? Even if it's limited, and even if it's short-winded, right? The other one is really being able to communicate to your board of directors, right? You have to have that attention. You have to have that vein, and learning how to do that as an industry professional is another really key piece. Measuring risk, I've learned a lot through this program as well, in terms of how to measure risk, both qualitatively and quantitatively. Understanding when to apply which one of those, risk frameworks to try to communicate to others to capture the essence of that business professional. Do they want to see numbers? I've got it, right? I'm assimilating that data. I can find, some sort of a risk package that will help you understand the importance of cybersecurity, or just something simple, quick, 1 through 5 methodology that's more qualitative and subjective. And knowing when to apply it, right? So that's another really critical element is knowing how to and when to, communicate up to your C-suite and your board of directors to make sure they understand the importance of what you're trying to accomplish, and that finances, resources, different labor elements are in play. That would be my two major call outs to an education, to academia. And I feel like what's helped me a lot, right, is that hands-on experience, right? Know it, learn it, get lab oriented, get your hands on that keyboard. And then how do you go and ascend all the way up to that board of directors level to make sure that they understand what you're trying to do in the industry and the way you intend to change.
Great. Excellent answer. Folks, do we have any last questions? Valerie says, thank you, Dan. Do we have any last questions for Dan or for Daniel?
We're not hiring any more Dans. If that was a question, that's not a requirement.
All right. Well, that looks like everybody's ready to wrap up. I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat. So thank you, Dan, and thank you, Daniel, for joining us. Dan, this was awesome. I wish that we'd been able to broadcast it from the SOC, but we'll just have to schedule another one of these in a few months and do it from the SOC and get a little bit more into the nitty gritty of how things work there. But this was excellent. Thank you so much for all the information and for explaining everything, especially the abbreviations. I think there's a lot of abbreviations that people have no idea what they are in cyber, so that was helpful. So got a little applause from some people, and Jana says, thank you to both Dans. Have a great day. So it looks like we've got some satisfied customers. All right. Well, thanks, Dan. Thanks, Daniel. I'm going to let you guys get back to your day. And thank you, audience, for joining us. I do want to point out one thing before we go. We are recruiting for the Power Up Cyber Games, which is a monthly youth cybersecurity competition series that's going to start up in the fall. And if you have any interest in the Power Up Cyber Games for your middle school or high school students, then shoot me an email. It's Power Up, all one word, Power Up at WeCyberUp. Again, all one word, WeCyberUp.org. And my name is Mike. It just says Amber because that's the owner of the license, but I'm actually Mike. Cool. So yeah, Valerie, shoot me a email message and we'll get something set up so that we can chat. Power up at WeCyberUp.org. All right. Well, thank you everyone again for joining us today. This was very enlightening and informative and entertaining. So thanks, Dan. Thanks, Daniel. You guys have a great day. I look forward to speaking with you soon. And thank you, audience, for joining us.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.